Hello everyone, welcome to the video. In this video, we're going to see the top 3 small cap mutual funds for 2024. And I've picked these 3 because one, I invest in these 3. Second, I've done my research multiple times and I repeat the research every year to pick the top 3 funds. And if I need rebalancing, all 3 of these funds have been in my portfolio for a while and I'm going to continue my SIPs and be investing in these funds in 2024. So out of these 3 funds, there are 2 main funds that I invest in and there's one secondary or backup fund. Now you don't have to invest in 3 different small cap mutual funds. You can pick any one of these funds or in probably a scenario where you want to have more exposure to small cap different funds, different companies, and you can pick 2 of these, but make sure you check the fund overlap before you pick 2 of those funds. You may not need to invest in all 3 of these funds. So let's get started. The first one, and I'm going to order it based on the returns of the 5-year returns, highest to lowest, and all 3 of them are comparable in terms of returns, but the first one is Nippon India Small Cap Fund. And this fund has been around. It is 43,000 crore asset under management, AUM. And this is a actively managed small cap fund. We're only talking about actively managed small cap funds, of course. And small cap is the universe where you actually want to go for actively managed funds, because there are just so many companies to pick from that you want someone reliable to be doing it for you, who is the fund manager in this case. So let's see the key metrics. The returns are, let me show you the returns. It's 30.18% over the last 5 years. Recently in the last, let's move the video here. In the last 3 years, it's done 40.19%, 1 year 51%. So very good returns consistently. And that's something that you would like to see in a small cap fund. However, I would be wary of thinking about what it's done in the last 1 year. When it comes to small cap, I'm looking at a long-term horizon. So something like 5 years. अगर 5 साल से कम है horizon, I'm not even looking at small cap funds. In that case, I'm looking at something like a mid cap or mostly large cap funds. तो returns यहाँ पे काफ़ी अच्छे हैं. That's the first thing. Second is the expense ratio. So if you look at the expense ratio, it's 0.69%. Compare it with the category expense ratio, which is at 1.24%. So it's almost half of, not half, but 40% less of what the category average expense ratio is. Then you have the P by E ratio, which should not be a big concern when it comes to a actively managed small cap fund. You really need to look at the expense ratio, and that's going to be your key metric, and the returns that it has generated in the past overall consistently without much of a volatility. अगर आपको volatility से problem नहीं है तो अलग बात है, but I personally would like a fund which is not that volatile. That's why one of the funds that you might have seen on YouTube and आपने देखा होगा YouTubers recommend करें, जिसका नाम है Quant Small Cap Fund, वो मैं recommend नहीं करता हूँ. But it is a good fund, it has generated returns, but due to the volatility reasons and the asset under management being a new fund house itself, I'm not very keen on that, because I'm investing in small cap funds for 10 years or even more than a decade. तो expense ratio 0.69% है. Returns जैसा कि आपने देखा अच्छे हैं यहाँ पे. Now let's look at the portfolio. Okay, so we just go on the portfolio. एंड यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हो कि इसमें जो डाइवर्सिफिकेशन है वो मुझे अच्छा लगता है. IT सर्विसेज एंड कंसल्टिंग is less than 10%. All of these industries are also like this. It's not heavy on any of these industries. यहाँ पे आप देखो तो diversified chemicals, private banks, specialized, everything is like 3, 4, 5%, but the maximum you see IT services and consulting is also less than 10%. So एक industry में heavy नहीं है ये fund, which is a good thing. Similarly, एक स्टॉक में भी बहुत ज़्यादा हैवी नहीं है. आप देख सकते हो इसके बिगेस्ट जो होल्डिंग है ट्यूब इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इज ऑल्सो 2.6%. तो अच्छा एक्सपोजर है स्मॉल कैप यूनिवर्स में, एंड ओवरऑल इट इज़ कंसिस्टेंटली बीन एबल टू जनरेट गुड रिटर्न्स. सो दैट्स द फर्स्ट फंड. द फंड मैनेजर, यू कैन ऑल्सो सी द फंड मैनेजर एंड देयर एक्सपीरियंस. तो यहाँ पे 16 years of experience, 14 these are the AUM that they manage, Mr. Sameer and Tejas. आप इनकी और डिटेल्स भी देख सकते हैं फंड मैनेजर के बाद. इसके अलावा बहुत ज़्यादा इन्फॉर्मेशन में जाने के लिए, आई मीन इफ़ यू वांट टू लर्न अबाउट हाउ म्यूचुअल फंड्स वर्क एंड सो फोर्थ, you can go into more information, but for me this is how I would typically analyze a fund. So that's my Nippon India Small Cap Fund, and I'm just an investor. I'm not a financial advisor, neither am I educated in finance. This is my self education that I've done. तो ये metrics मेरे लिए key metrics हैं, and with these sort of funds, I've been able to generate this portfolio of 2.5 to 3 crores, usually in that range. So there's definitely something that I'm onto here and which I wanted to share with you guys. सेकेंड जो फंड है हमारा, अगेन रिटर्न भी काफ़ी सिमिलर है पहले वाले फंड से. दिस इज़ लेस देन 5 years ओल्ड, बट 4.9 years के अराउंड का इसका रिटर्न 29.69% है. 3 years पे जाते हैं 34.63% है. 1 year पे जाते हो तो 35.98% है. तो आप देख सकते हैं कि 1 year का इट्स नॉट एज इम्प्रेसिव एज द निपॉन इंडिया स्मॉल कैप फंड जो 1 year का रिटर्न है. हाउएवर 5 year रिटर्न कंपेरेबल है, उसमें 30 पॉइंट समथिंग परसेंट था, यहाँ पे 29 पॉइंट समथिंग परसेंट है. ठीक है, इट्स नॉट अ कंप्लीट ड्यूरेशन ऑफ 5 years बिकॉज दिस इज स्लाइटली न्यूअर फंड. तो इसका जो एसेट अंडर मैनेजमेंट है वो कम है. एंड इसके अलावा इसका जो एक्सपेंस रेशियो है दैट यू विल सी दैट इट्स एक्चुअली लोअर देन व्हाट वी सॉ विद द निपॉन इंडिया स्मॉल कैप फंड. So 0.44%, and if you compare it to the Nippon India Small Cap Fund, it was 0.69%. What we mean by this is the percentage that you'll lose to the fund house when you invest in these funds, right? And which is completely fair. I think all of these expense ratios are doable. So I wouldn't make a decision based on 0.69% and 0.44% because the difference is not that much. If you'd like like to tap on the short-term growth as well, which Nippon India Small Cap Fund has shown really well, I would say it's a pretty good fund to invest in. So the second fund is Canada Robeco Small Cap Fund. Let's look into the portfolio of this fund now. Okay. So portfolio wise, as you can see, also super diversified. Most of the small cap funds will tend to be diversified like this. And in terms of the companies as well, you see 2.81% is the biggest holding, and uske baad you have 2.6 and so forth. Now, if you study small cap companies, if you look into these companies like Persistent Systems, Ultratech, Siemens, these are companies, Bikaji Foods, these are companies that I was literally investing in directly. Sun Pharma, Mindtree, like these are companies I was investing in directly before I got into buying these small cap funds. So hence I enjoyed the portfolio that I saw with Canada Robeco, and that's why I liked this fund. So I would say this is how I made the decision of also get Canada Robeco Small Cap Fund. So if you were to compare based on key metrics, you will find that in many of the metrics, Nippon Small Cap will actually beat Canada Robeco, and except the expense ratio where Canada Robeco is definitely beating the Nippon. Asset under management is not that high, which is a good thing. It's not too low, which is also a good thing, right? So overall, pretty much a decent small cap fund to invest in. Now, तीसरा वाला small cap fund देख लेते हैं, and that is Tata Small Cap Fund. So 5-year returns 28.52%, third in the rank in terms of the 5-year returns, but all of them are 1% up and down, so it's not a huge difference. 3-year returns is 37.14%, which is pretty decent, comparable, and 1-year return is 39.76%. So it falls in between the Nippon India and the Canada Robeco in terms of the 1-year returns. Overall, all pretty decent numbers. Now let's look at the expense ratio, which is amazing, 0.30%. It's the lowest of all three. Right? So you're paying less money to the Tata fund house by investing in this fund. Now, as your investments grow bigger, this expense ratio, the amount wise, the expense ratio will also seem to be big, and that's when the difference will come. But at that point, you may not even, be worried about it so much, the 0.1, 0.2 difference. Again, like I said before, कि सिर्फ expense ratio के basis पे मैं ये decision नहीं बनाऊंगा. But again, it's a good fund. And now let's look at the portfolio here. Tata Small Cap Fund का portfolio देख लेते हैं. So we have IT services and consulting 7%. So anything else is below 7%, which is again pretty well diversified. And the biggest holdings here you can see have up to a 5% allocation. So they are betting, you might say they are betting slightly more on these small cap, on a few of these small cap companies. जैसे IDFC पे उनका सबसे बड़ा bet है, 4.52% का होल्डिंग है उनका, राइट? कैस कॉर्प लिमिटेड में 4.32%, एंड द लास्ट 3 months it's changed by 1.05%. So slightly more betting slightly more on each company in the portfolio is how you can think about this. So if you're not comfortable with that, again, you can consider one of the other two funds that we discussed before this, right? So these are the companies that this fund is investing in. And I would also suggest, अगर आपने companies के नाम देखे हैं, सुने हैं, and if you've been active in the stock market, even outside of the mutual fund universe, then it's always good to go through this list and see यार, अच्छा यूरेका, फोर्ब्स, रैमको, मैंने ये कंपनीज के नाम सुने हैं, हाउ डू आई फील अबाउट दीज कंपनीज, एंड दैट विल ऑल्सो गिव यू सम सॉर्ट ऑफ एन आइडिया अबाउट वेदर यू अलाइन विद दिस फंड और नॉट. बिकॉज एक तो होता है कि हाँ नंबर अच्छा है, 5 year रिटर्न, 3 year रिटर्न, बट द फैक्ट ऑफ द मैटर इज past returns are just an estimate. I mean, they are not in any way a means to measure the future returns. So you should be aligned with the funds and other metrics as well. जैसे कि हमने देखा एक्सपेंस रेशियो है, फंड मैनेजर है, फंड मैनेजर का स्टाइल कैसा है इन्वेस्टिंग का, ये बहुत लोग बोलते हैं कि आप देखो, बट ऑनेस्टली मुझे पर्सनली लगता है मेरे पास इतना टाइम नहीं है ये सोचने का कि ये फंड मैनेजर का स्टाइल कैसा है इन्वेस्टिंग का. तो फंड मैनेजर में मैं इतना ज़्यादा नहीं जाता, पर मैं ये ज़रूर देख लेता हूँ कि उनका एसेट अंडर मैनेजमेंट कितना है, और ऐसा नहीं कि वो 5 साल से ही फंड मैनेज कर रहे हैं. लाइक एनीथिंग अबाउट 10 years इज़ गुड फॉर मी. अगर उनके बारे में कोई रेड फ्लैग है तो पता चल जाता है, राइट? सो इफ़ यू जस्ट सर्च फॉर द नेम on news, you might find इन्होंने कोई घपला तो नहीं किया, like just basic stuff like that, right? So those are the funds. Of course, going into the peers is also a good way to see how they compare. So if you're looking at the 1 year returns, 3 year returns, and lifetime returns, then you see that Nippon India is a pretty solid fund, which we discussed, and that's why it's on number one. That's my number one small cap investment opportunity. Again, asset under management could be huge, which honestly I don't feel it's that big of an issue. That's the first one. Second one, we've seen Canada Robeco and Tata Small Cap. Now, how do you pick the fund? Like I said, आप ये देखो कि आपके साथ कौन सा फंड बेस्ट अलाइन करता है. Then you look at the metrics, your 5 year returns, 3 year returns, 1 year, which I've shown you. Look at the expense ratio, as you've seen Nippon India का higher side पे compared to these three, but compared to the small cap category, these are all very good expense ratios. तो less than 1% आपके लिए पूरा small cap universe में से कोई बंदा funds pick कर रहा है, manage कर रहा है, that's a pretty good deal, right? Then you can also see the companies, like I showed you the portfolios. I've given you the entire process as well. Which of these companies you align with, then you'll know, okay, this is the kind of fund that I align with. If you see that some funds have a lot of weightage and you wouldn't do that if you were managing a small cap fund, then you may not be aligning with that fund manager. So Nippon India is number one. Then we have Canada Robeco. Then we have Tata Small Cap. You might place this in a different order, but that's up to you. This is my ranking of the top 3 small cap funds in India. If you like this video and you want to see more rankings of different mutual funds, of course, when it comes to actively managed mutual funds, we only recommend, like I only recommend my friends to invest in small cap and mid cap actively managed mutual funds. For large cap, index funds is the way to go. So do check out my videos on ETFs that you can use to invest in large cap funds, as well as indexes that you can use. So indices, investing in indices could be done via ETF or index funds. If there's any questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, that's all for this video. See you in the next one.